can jump in maybe. I work with Healthy Aging Alberta, and we recently had a student come on and do a bit of research and just kind of policy evaluation to some degree, and looking at granting systems and reporting for granting and kind of that fatigue that happens for nonprofit organizations. And so really went into community, spoke to community directly, and kind of evaluated three different funding streams, and just looked for opportunities to streamline that reporting. So you're not writing six different reports with the same information, which is part of that fatigue, I think. Kind of like being in university and regurgitating the same essay over and over again. But so yeah, it was just a really good opportunity to have a student come in to do that, a neutral party, which I think is really important and gives that opportunity for community to speak freely about some of the concerns. And what really came of it was the importance of storytelling. And so Healthy Aging is working really closely with Connecting People and Community for Living Well, to collect stories and help that, and not only collect stories, but like compile them and put them in a format that's readily available for ongoing reporting. So what I think to some degree, like that's a form of research, right? And really helping to get the community active. And that project came from the direct result of speaking to community and hearing those concerns. And I was just kind of thinking as you were talking about like community-driven research is so essential. And like with Healthy Aging, I put in the chat, but we work from an asset-based community development lens. And really it is the citizens of the community that drive the work forward, and they know what's best for their community. And so if we parachute in, oftentimes that type of approach never works because we just don't know like the citizens do. So I really appreciated that kind of perspective around community-driven research. I think that's a really key thing that I'll bring back to my team as well as an insight to think about as we take on more students. And we're always looking for opportunities to partner with academia. Big part of our role as a provincial initiative is pushing policy and moving policy forward to better the lives of older Albertans. And so, yeah, that really it should be community driven for it to work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I must say that I'll actually do a little caveat that, because I was thinking as you were talking, that a lot of things that I've learned about community-driven research come from as a former PhD student of mine who for a couple of years was the executive director of Out Saskatoon. And she's now a professor at the University of Saskatchewan in women's and gender studies, but her name is Rachel Logan Walker. And honestly, like, I think that it would maybe even be worth, like, if you want to, hear more about because she does a lot she's the first person with whom I've had these conversations about the different like model and the different direction and what it means. And what's also interesting is that she has a PhD in philosophy, which you don't necessarily think of as the most practical community engaged field. And so it's really interesting to hear about that. And she does also a lot of granting, and she did a lot for Out Saskatoon, but she does a lot now as an academic for like applying for partnership, like the SSHRC grant that we're talking about, applying for it with community. And partnership grants are part of these grants that require partners and series of partners. And the question is, how do nonprofit and community organization, like smaller organizations that don't necessarily have a ton of resources, how do they get on these partnership that are they're funded, and they always bring together really interesting, because part of what maybe I'll talk about that first. So SSHRC, the Social Science and Humanities Research Council, is so it's our major funding body for academics in the field of social science and humanities. And they have over the years changed a little bit the way in which they think about research. And they both for individual grants, but also for partnership grants, they want us to show that, they want academics to show that they're improving the knowledge capacity in the community. And so we can't just, and even like if I apply for a grant to write a book, okay, I have to write a knowledge mobilization document. And they, in the instruction, they say, well, don't just show how you're going to disseminate your knowledge to the community. And for example, because everybody says, I'll just do a blog, you know, because that's, you know, that's kind of the only idea we have. And I'll try to not use any jargon, you know, but show also how the community will inform how, you know, it's a two-way street, and how you will, you know, engage the community so that you also learn, so that it informs how you think about your research question, so that the answer, so that whatever you learn from the community is fed back into your research, and then you can like disseminate it, so that it's a two-way street. And the same for partnership. They really want us to increase the capacity of community organization and nonprofit, rather than just exploiting them to get, you know, research funding. And so the other thing is that now they have requirements that whatever ways in which we publish our research, that our research finding, because the research is funded by the government of Canada, that our research findings be accessible. And so we're not allowed to publish under behind paywalls. And the last I checked, there was the rule was like 1 year, or maybe it's 3, or there are certain, you know, there's rules. But, you know, there's also a requirement that we make the research accessible. Now, this is the shifting landscapes. It's not perfect yet, but there's definitely a push in the understanding of publicly funded research to shift the way that, to shift the relationship between community and academia. I'd say that, well, Daryl, do you want to, because I can keep answering the other questions, because I've read the questions in advance. It gives me a, you know, advantage.
No, if there's anything, you know, any kind of final thoughts on this, yeah, please.
Yeah, so I would say that one of the challenge for thinking about, you know, partnering with academics is, I will say also that for this community engaged research or community driven research, the Faculty of Arts has done a lot of work thinking about what research is. Because one thing you have to know is that as professors, we are evaluated every year on our research productivity. And so we have to every year tell our boss, the dean, and a big committee that will decide how much merit we get. We have to tell them everything we did. And we have to tell them what we did in terms of research. So what our research output, what research output we've produced, and also what service we gave, okay? And research output used to be, you know, you wrote a bunch of articles that you publish in a journal. And we have a lot of different people who do a lot of different things in the Faculty of Arts. We have musicians, we have directors, actors, we have a clown, which is like, you know, clown work. So it's, we have social scientists, we have Indigenous people who work in communities, we have, as I said, the visual communication people. So we're doing a lot of work thinking about what does research look like and how does it show up? And I think that's helping, because if you produce knowledge if you work in tandem with a community or a nonprofit to produce knowledge for them, the question for us is always, well, how do you report it? And how valued is it going to be? Okay. And that's a huge barrier for academics with the pressure of being a productive researcher, because it's hard to do both. And often will report a lot of the community work as outreach or service to the broader community is a category, but that's not necessarily valued in the same way. And so one of the big challenge is something that you have zero control over. It's just the way that, you know, the institution of how higher education is structured and what it values. And that's shifting. But again, it's a cultural shift that takes, time. And we just had a panel with a few Indigenous scholars who do community engaged research, so they could talk about what it's like to do research the way that they do, and why is it that a lot of it is relationship nurturing. A lot of it is you need to wait, and you need to like the time frame is not your own. And so the fact that you have to report something, and that your institution is finding you unproductive, is it's like sort of a clash between the two things. The other challenge is that, so at the U of A, for example, we're thinking more about our connection to, let's say, the outside world. And so they have this new portfolio, and it's called Enterprise. And it's funny because I had a conversation yesterday with the advisor, because what they're trying to do is build a portal at the university where community and nonprofit, a business, like anybody, government even, could come and connect and say, I'm X and I need Y. Like I have this question, I would really need a, social scientist to figure this out, or I would need someone to, tell me about the intricacies of that thing or whatever. And they're trying to build a portal, which I think is would be really cool, because it would be part of the thing we always hear, especially with a university like the U of A, that's so big. But even the smaller universities, people don't always know where to go. And unless they know someone, unless they have someone in their organization that went to there, that has a prof, that, unless there's sort of a personal connection, they're kind of lost as to where to approach the institution with their question, which might also not be super well formulated. And so I thought, oh, that's really, really interesting. But the way the university talks about this new office, it's called Enterprise, is very, very business oriented. It's about, they're talking in terms of millions of dollars and commercialization and new patents. And so I raised my hand and I was like, well, what about like the nonprofit? What about the little people? Like, can they access the university through this? And he was like, yeah, I think that's really, really important. Even though the university, this is also the thing, like the university as a big structure cares a lot about really big things that generate a lot of money. The people on the ground care a lot about the little connections that are really important, and helping organizations that the university doesn't really see as, they're like, doesn't really want to invest their time and energy in cultivating their relationship, because it's not going to generate millions of dollars. And that's a tension also, even like within our own work, to remind always institution that we actually are super meaningful partners to a lot of community organization and nonprofit. And we play a really important role in that sector in Edmonton and in the province. And they need to also help us facilitate these kind of connections.
Interesting. I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. But I think somewhat piggybacking off of that, actually, and kind of taking into account a lot of what you said with the challenges that academia faces. But I do really appreciate what you've said about kind of this push, or some of the conditions that are now being ingrained into the systems, for example, of how to lean into community-driven research. I feel like from my own personal experiences and some of the conversations that we've had here, one of the challenges with any of these kinds of partnerships, whether it be with academic institutions or even with government, is the challenge of making sure that we are partners that have equal standing, and that there isn't, this weird power dynamic where, there is sure that this acknowledgement that maybe we are, compared to our partners, potentially under-resourced, and I'm not sure where it comes from. But sometimes, and it's not always the case, but there are instances where I felt like from the other side, there's kind of the sense of entitlement almost, or this sense that because of where the partnership lies, there's more bargaining power on the other side to dictate the terms of that partnership. So it's really interesting hearing you say, kind of the push, at least in the systems, to let communities ask the question or really direct the question and all these things. I am curious though, if there's anything you feel like that organizations can or need to do to make sure that we still do have that sense of equal standing and partnership. Given some of from the academic side of things, like obviously you still have to, you have to be productive with your research. But engaging this idea of like a meaningful partnership, which for me, like part of it is making sure that we're equal partners. What do you think we can do or should do? And what would you like to see?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because I feel like it's more like it's really interesting working in a university because there's a lot of, I could think like we're all we all have like degrees and we're all educated people, we think, but there's a lot of power dynamic, even like among ourselves. And so I think that that's a really difficult, it's a really difficult problem to solve for. Like, I feel like it's not the role of the partner organization to do that. And I'm not sure. I think that the best way is probably to be really clear about what you are bringing to the research, and that, we're talking about the puzzle pieces, and so that there's, and it's, which is not just raw data for others to interpret, but that you actually have information or knowledge or, that, and you're the holder of that, and that's irreplaceable. Because I think that that's that's part of the power dynamic, or is that, we tend to think, or some researchers tend to think, that the communities have data, pieces of information, but the academic has the knowledge. And so we have the, the understanding of the data, the way to analyze it, and, this is the sort of what I was saying is the extractive, model. So I think that being really, really clear about the fact that what you have is not just pieces of information, but it is actual knowledge, and that knowledge cannot be found in any other way than, than through your organization or through your people. I think that's what equalized the sort of partnership.
I think that's really interesting to say that, because I feel like even on our side, I feel like there is more work that needs to be done in amplifying the work that we do, its value, and even just amplifying our reach. And there are issues of not enough collaboration and sharing information, data, or even collaboration and what to do with the information that we gather with and for our communities. So I feel like that's something that really resonates with me, and I think that's a conversation that we've had with this group, and hopefully it's an ongoing one that that for me, like, I know it's a broader thing, right? It's a bigger systemic thing, and a lot of it we can't necessarily control. But I totally agree. Like, in this, like, yes, of course, be sure and maybe even have a little bit of confidence in the value of the work that we do, but be clear in what we bring, and but yeah, like I feel like there are still also those broader aspects of mobilizing even on our end. Okay. Anyway, that's interesting, and I think that was maybe a big question. But maybe coming back to like something that we have talked about before with this group also is, this question of accessibility. I think you kind of spoke on it a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot of information out there that's behind paywalls, information that's not necessarily easy to understand. Do you have what thoughts do you have?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts about that, because I think also that part of this is also part of what teaching is. And, this sort of, I was going to say two approaches, but we have someone in education here. So lots of different approaches, but, like I believe that the hardest thing to do for me as a teacher is to explain, Plato or Kant, the really hard philosopher, or Hegel, someone really hard to a first-year student, so that they understand what's at stake. So it means something to them. Okay, to me, that's the most important thing that I do. Explaining that to a PhD student, that's easy, because we already share like a ton of, background. When or the field that I study, which is phenomenology, like to have someone, in the bus ask me like, well, what is that? And to be able to say something that's meaningful, not something that where I distort what I'm thinking, but to truly get to the heart of what it is that this means, and to be able to explain that so that it's meaningful to the person where they stand. That to me is like the work that we're supposed to be doing. I'm not doing a pretty good job at that in general. I think that so that's the accessibility in terms of the way that the way the knowledge looks. Okay. And I think that it depends whether you think of academia as something that should be guarded, as sort of a clique where the better we are, the less people understand us, or whether you think of academia as, knowledge sharing, as and you think of teaching, and teaching especially like, the beginners as part of what you're becoming better at. So that's the first thing. And I think that, so we had on that panel with the Indigenous scholars, there was also a new person we hired in media studies and critical game design. They were saying that they, so they write academic articles, but in order to write the article, they also design games, and they release these games. They have people play them. They do, and so there's this sort of all like engagement through that. And they were saying 4 people have downloaded my article. 15,000 people have downloaded my game, And so there's a huge outreach that's happening through something that's in a different medium. And I think that we have to start valuing that in the academia, rather than valuing just the super niche, high-ranking journal that nobody can afford and nobody reads, But that's, again, something about the kind of things that we value. But as we get more young people who do a lot of different things, I think this is also going to shift. About the paywall, as I was saying, SSHRC and a lot of the founding agencies now require that we either use their fund to buy open access, or that we use open access then. So I think that there's going to be a change in that. The other thing I would say is that it's always possible to just write to the researcher and say, I'm so-and-so from this like nonprofit, and I do not have access to this, but this research is important to our organization for this reason. Can we, get a preprint? Can we get access in some other way? And I think that you would get a lot of uptake from that. I get people write to me all the time saying, I can't afford your book. And I'm like, here's a copy, just don't tell anybody. So I think there might be a little bit more willingness. And there's also a lot of journals will have rules about what you can share. And it's like, you can't share the final version, you can share a preprint, you can share a draft, you can share, there are other things that you can share. It's very complicated. And there's a lot of different versions of these copyrights agreement. But in general, the researcher is able to share something. And I wouldn't, I would just find them and email them and say. Because in general, I think researchers are always really flattered if you say, because 3 people have read the thing, if you go and you say, hey, that's really important to us, can we get it? Can we use it? Can we,
That's really interesting. Yeah, and now you're prompting me to think like maybe part of the challenge too is like potentially not everybody knows how to actually get in these kinds of partnerships. Like I didn't know that Shirk is kind of evolving in the way that you've described. So maybe part of the work the VA can do, for example, or whoever else, is actually describe kind of how Shirk works or the process. I don't know how many people here, representing organizations, like how familiar you are with Shirk and how it works. So I think there's even like that piece of understanding the processes and what exists.
yeah, and even just understanding the different kind of grants and the different kind of, you can be a co-investigator or collaborate. That is 7 different categories of things. Like I don't even understand it. That's why we have at the university, we have a network of research partners who support us into applying for these things. So I understand that we need that, and we're the experts. So I understand that it's a super complicated landscape to navigate. And that's just for that. Like there's a lot of other grants. And so we have an office that supports us. So but yeah, that might be also interesting to get someone from a university or research partner or something to come in and just talk about the possibilities.
Note that down. But so I am looking at time here. So I'm thinking maybe I open this up to the group now. Do you folks have any questions or thoughts, things that even came from your group discussions that you want to bring up now? Love to hear from you.
I think I appreciate like sorry, I'm a talker, and so I try and wait as long as I can to break the silence. But I know in our group we picked the image of the library, and we were just saying like how much we miss having access to databases. Like once you leave post-secondary, like I went to the University of Calgary, I went to Bow Valley, and beautiful databases, and you can just search and pull information to support what your stance is, and you lose that. And so it's really, I guess, encouraging to hear that this research is hopefully less likely to be behind a paywall, and being able to access that. And as like nonprofits, a lot of time we're working really closely with government, and government they want fact, they want peer-reviewed information, they want to know why we're asking what we're asking. And you can only get so far on like Census Canada and some of those like kind of gray sources. So yeah, no, to me, I just felt encouraged to hear that like hopefully more information readily accessible.
Yeah, I'll say on the bad side of that, a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe during COVID, the library, the university, the U of A has some budgetary challenges, and that's an understatement. But one of the things that in our library is like, we have a great library, it's amazing. But one of the things that they did is that the catalog now is you have to log in to access the catalog, all the function of the catalog. So you can't even know what we have, if you don't have a CCID. And I have people who will email me and say, hey, can you look this up? I even have friends in other, in institutions, for example, in Europe, and who will say, like, I can't find this because we have great access at the U of A. And I say, I can't find this article. Can you check? And then and I do that also sometimes with foreign, like stuff in French, for example, with some of, but yeah, we do. I think that, we also, even as academics, we encounter that problem too. And we have to, I won't tell you to do anything illegal, but we have to find workaround, because nobody has the funds to, really do that. But yeah, I was very disappointed when the U of A decided that you needed a CCID to search the catalog. And you can buy a community access, but it's really complicated. Like you have to get a status and you have to get into the system. And we try sometimes to do it for some special visiting like arrangement and everything, and it's super complicated. And you think that knowledge would be slightly easier to get to.
That kind of speaks to like the power dynamic between like, it's not cheap to go to university and school. And so like if you don't, even just as a citizen, like if you don't have the money to be able to access academia, you miss out on so much of this knowledge. And there's stuff I should have known years ago, but I only learned it in university because of the access to that knowledge. And yeah, it just to some degree feels like unfair. That it's built in that sort of way, almost like an elite system of knowledge where like research is being done with the public, so why does public not have access to what they're putting forward? So yeah, no, it's making me think. Thank you. I appreciate your insights.
I'm gonna be, yes. Oh, I don't know if that's a handout, but maybe I'm gonna invite one more thought here, just to bring another perspective in or another question. Even some reflections from what you heard that you'd like to share.
I just wanted to quickly jump on, but it's not a question, but more on reflection. I just wanted to say that I also appreciate like you sharing the process behind like grant funding, for example, and applying to those things. Because like sometimes, even though I went to post-secondary, I still sometimes see academia as like big institution that is inaccessible, and researchers in the lab doing their own thing and just putting content out there, and it lands where it lands. But the fact that right now it sounds like the process is so intentional when it comes to community engagement and putting community the real problems in the center of your work. I just want to say that I appreciate like the context behind that, and like the steps that are being taken to make sure that the work that our researchers are doing, for example, are something that organizations and community can really use to advocate for issues that they care about. And so it's not this like big entity, this mysterious entity, but it's something that it's like willing to collaborate with community organizations.
That's a great thought. Did you want to quickly respond to that, Maria?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, yeah, that's and honestly, it's not true of the entire, it's not true of the entire academia, but there are definitely entries. And I think that one of the challenges is finding the right connection, finding the right door in the university, and that will bring you to the right person, or the right research team and everything. And I think that we also very aware in academia that we have to also be more intentional about that. One of the things is that we're really hard, even within the university. Like there are, profs and other faculties that work on similar things. And it took me like 10 years to know they existed. And we work in the same place, So I think that we also have to be better at, our outside looking face has to be better and more accessible. There has to be doors, and the doors have to lead to meaningful places. Better websites. We're not good at that.
Maybe across the board. Okay, just want to stop her.